Hello, everybody, and welcome to this last LinkedIn Live of 2022 for Clean Hub. Today, we're going to be talking about sustainability in cosmetics packaging. My name's Nikki Stones. I'm VP of Marketing at Clean Hub, where we're on a mission to prevent 50% of new ocean plastic by 2030. I'm delighted to be joined today by a truly global panel of experts: Victoria Cushing, Product Director at KMI Brands, based in the UK; Stryker, Director for Impact at Beauty for All Industries, joining us from Los Angeles; and last but definitely not least, live from Germany, Packaging Strategy Consultant Felix. Thank you all very much for being here. Perhaps you'd like to tell our guests a little bit about yourselves. Victoria, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Victoria from KMI Brands. We make beauty products within the UK. We have our licensed brands, which is Ted Baker, and then we own our own brands, which is a 97% natural hair care brand, Naughty, which we work with Clean Hub on, and also a new brand called Plantopia, which is a wellness brand. I'm head of all product development at KMI, but also all the sustainability that we have put together.
Lovely. Thank you, Victoria. Amber?
Hi, everyone. I'm Stryker, and I'm the Director of Impact at Beauty for All. And Beauty for All is the parent company to Ipsy and BoxyCharm, which are two beauty subscriptions where we have hundreds of brand partners that we're delivering to our millions of subscribers in North America. We're in the US, Canada, and Mexico. We also have several direct-to-consumer brands that are in Ulta and Sephora, and we're selling on our direct-to-consumer sites where we're producing some of our own products as well. And I oversee all sustainability and social impact at Beauty for All.
Lovely. Thank you, Amber. And Felix?
Hi, hello. I'm Felix. I'm a packaging engineer with close to 2 decades of experience in packaging design and R&D at multinational companies. Currently, I'm running a packaging consulting business and work with global and regional players to help them with the transformation to sustainable packaging. The focus is primarily on cosmetic and food packaging, and in this capacity, we develop packaging strategies for our clients and support them during the implementation phase. There are certainly many challenges and opportunities for packaging, and today I'm here to talk about my experience developing sustainable packaging and looking forward to a great panel discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, all of you. And of course, a very big welcome to everyone that's joining us live or via recording later. As always, for anyone that's live, we will have time for questions at the end, so you can ask them in the chat and we'll get through as many as we can. So, cosmetics. Let's start with a few fun facts, shall we? The beauty industry is actually one of the world's most recession-proof industries. It seems that even when we tighten our belts, cosmetics is something we can't actually do without. And actually, the cosmetics market is expected to surpass over 100 billion in revenue worldwide this year, with American women spending an average of just under $4,000 per year on beauty products and services. And actually, the men's personal care market is catching up fast. It's now projected to hit a whopping 275 billion by 2030, which is obviously great news for business and great news for the economy. But what it does mean is that we're actually producing 120 billion units of packaging every year globally. And, think about things like complex lids, multi-layer boxes, cellophane. A lot of this is superfluous. A lot of it's non-recyclable, and a lot of it ends up in our landfills and oceans. And it's this that actually makes the cosmetics industry one of the key contributors to environmental pollution. So Felix, let's start with the big picture. I mean, I think, certainly the desire to change seems to be there. Clean Hub is talking to cosmetics brands every week, that want to partner with us. But what is it about this transition to more sustainable packaging that's proving so elusive for the industry as a whole?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, first of all, there's probably 3 different challenges that exist today. Firstly, I think it's quite a loaded word, but actually, what is sustainable packaging? What is it for your company? What does it mean in general? Is it about reducing plastics, eliminating it? Is it about reduction of CO2 or other greenhouse gas emissions? So defining that is already a first and challenging part, and then obviously finding the way through the jungle of options that exist and identifying what's needed for your brand is definitely a challenge. In today's supply chain environment, I think it's as well challenging to source the right materials consistently. Supply chains are disrupted all over the board, and even for some of the new materials that seem to be quite promising as well for the cosmetic industry, it's tough to get them at large scales. So that's definitely a challenge for many players in the field. Certainly reducing plastics or trying to eliminate that completely is one of the biggest challenges that we have still. And plastic has good benefits, and so not all is bad about that, but still finding good alternatives that meet product needs and product requirements that do exist for shelf life protections is still one of the challenging parts. But with challenges, obviously, always come opportunities, and with that, there are still things that companies and brand owners can do. And one of probably maybe the first steps and easiest steps to do is really to look into design for recycling and recyclability, which is often a small step or first step, but still can already generate a good level of impact. And as we transition as well into a different use and different schemes, reuse is actually, I would say, up and coming and provides a good opportunity for primary packaging, but as well if you are a brand owner that sells a lot on e-commerce, where you can drive quite a good level of adoption and reduce a lot of waste when it comes to that. So yeah, I would say those are the parts where definitely pieces are challenging. Again, cost when it looks to replacing materials. Plastics still quite often is the cheapest option, which is still tempting for many brand owners. And many new materials that do come up still need to catch up to that gap and be cost competitive and be available at large scales. And I would say those are, in broad strokes, some of the key challenges.
Yeah, thank you, Felix. Certainly not a straightforward challenge, is it? It'll be quite interesting actually to get a perspective from the brand actually now, or brand's perspective. So, Victoria, you're looking after sustainability goals at KMI, rolling them into the product portfolio. Could you talk us through the packaging strategy at KMI and actually particularly what's changed over recent years?
Yeah, I think it is a real challenge, like Felix said, but I think for us, it was about understanding our starting point so that we could put measures in place. So we've conducted our carbon footprint analysis. We've also done specific LCAs, life cycle analysis on some of our products so that we can actually make a choice that is based on fact and put in place targets that are measurable, essentially. So, we're talking about plastic, and we know that plastic sometimes has a bad word, but if you look at the LCA, and you measure it on carbon footprint, then actually it's one of the least carbon emissions packaging to use. So I think for us, we put targets in place, one, all based on the UN sustainability goals, essentially, because we believe that at KMI, we have to all work together to be able to achieve what they have set out. So we haven't done anything drastically different from that. So, the carbon emissions is one that we are looking at. And as I say, we've got life cycle analysis to be able to make informed choices about what's right for that product. But also the 4 Rs, which come into packaging. So reuse where we absolutely can, recycle. So when we go into product development now, whereas before it used to be, like Felix said, cost, what's the lowest cost we can get for the product, but the product being, efficacy and that people will repurchase. But it was, we need to get that at the best price. That's not how we go into product development anymore. It's thinking about, right, can the packaging be recycled? Can we make a refillable, reusable alternative? Can we reduce the amount of material that we're actually using. And we've got targets in place for all of these for the next, 5-10 years on the reductions that we want to make in all of these different areas. And then I think, also recover, we know we're a brand, Naughty is a brand at $7.99, $8.99. It has to be affordable for the customer. So we've got to be realistic. There's a cog that we have to be able to hit, because we have to make a profit in order to be able to do the people and planet part of it. So it's about working with yourselves and other like-minded companies to, recover what plastic we're putting in other areas that, don't have that recycling element. So that's really what we're trying to achieve at KMI. But I think, as I say, the biggest mindset and the biggest change is, it's not about the cog, it's about the packaging. It's about thinking about the long-term implications that we are doing for that product, and sort of trying to future-proof it where we can, but also saying, we don't have all the answers. We might have to change it again along the way to keep up with the technology that hopefully more and more is coming out.
Will come. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's something we often say, there isn't a silver bullet, and actually you do need, like, brands need to be taking a multi-pronged approach and, sort of looking at innovations and looking at initiatives in all areas, right? Because those solutions don't yet necessarily exist. I'm also interested as well, is I know that you've, with packaging, then you've tried alternatives that sort of, more sustainable. How's that worked? Tell us a little bit about that and what you've tried and what happened.
Yeah, I mean, we've tried quite a few things. So we quite early on adopted sugarcane within our tubes and our bottles, which has worked really, really well. And looking at a life cycle analysis, which we've actually done, it is one of the best alternatives to use. But Felix mentioned supply chain. During lockdown and COVID, the supply chain of sugarcane, where we get it from, actually, we couldn't get it anymore. So we'd done all this product development to change all of our packaging to sugarcane, to then have to make a quick alternative. And we moved into a percentage of PCR within some of our products. So now we are currently a mixture of sugarcane, PCR, virgin, which is another project that's going on to try and look at what is the best going forward for us to use. So yeah, alternatives are great, but then when everybody then buys into it, we have that problem always. And I think it's about having that backup to make sure that you've got that supply chain.
Yeah, we're still in the place in the cycle, really, where you need to have the plan Bs there, basically. Yeah, absolutely. And Amber, you're the first ESG hire. You guys have set some really ambitious goals. Can you tell us a bit more about Beauty for All Industries and your internal model for how you've gone about tackling the problem?
Sure. So as you said at the beginning of the call, we know that the problem's really big. And so, we see, millions and millions of products coming through our business, plastic products coming through our business every year, whether they're through our brand partners and things that we're creating. And so what we wanted to do is start with what we could control the most. So that's where we set a goal to reduce, in our owned brands, to reduce our use of virgin plastic to a maximum of 50% of the materials we're creating in our own brands. We were really, that's by 2023. We were really excited to announce in our first ESG report earlier this year that we've hit 51%. So we just got to get down to that last percentage point. And that's, been really exciting, been really challenging, and really about moving from a lot of what Victoria's talking about is super familiar. Like, how do you move from sustainability or more sustainable packaging choices being a nice to do to like a have to do? Mm-hmm. And the reality is everyone wants to make better packaging for the world. Like, anyone I'm working with across our teams, I'm sure with all of our teams, everyone wants to do better for the world. It's just really challenging at times with with other business goals. So for us, it was really about integrating our sustainability goals into our business goals, which kind of frees people up. It frees our product team up to consider those decisions along with COGS, just like Victoria is saying. So that's something that we've been working on over the last couple of years, and have seen some really strong progress on. Some of the other things we're considering, so that's our area of the business, it's our own brands, but of course we are working with hundreds of brand partners and delivering so many products from brand partners, from like really big name cosmetic companies to like new brands that are just starting out, that we're like it's their first time to do 100,000 units. So in that, we're starting to consider, what does it look like to encourage, highlight, inform our members about what more sustainable packaging is, and help them to make choices about what they want to choose that might be more sustainable packaging. So that may look like badging in the future. What we're starting with is just collecting a lot of information. So we are doing surveys and collecting a ton of information from all of our brand partners to understand what's in there already. Like what are our star brands doing that are like leading the pack on sustainability, and how can we help take those learnings from those brands and inform all of our other brands about what they're doing. So that's something we're starting out on, and I'm really excited about what we're going to do, but I'm really proud of what we've been able to accomplish on our own brands, though it's not easy.
No, congratulations as well. I mean, almost there then. Hopefully you can get to that target by the end of the year. I'm curious, I mean, you talked about actually, the importance of setting KPIs at a company level. I guess the key things for this is, getting executive support, making sure the right incentives are there. Has that been easy enough to do?
Yeah, I'm very lucky, and then I get to work with a lot of executives that are super bought into this goal. When I first brought our first packaging goal to our CEO, he said, "What can we do that's bigger? Like, how can we do more?" Nice. So he really pushed me and our teams to set our goals higher and see what we could accomplish. So yes, I think, and it's essential. So because everyone has a lot of business goals they're working towards. We're all moving really quickly. In order to make this a priority, it has to be, I think, really baked into those KPIs, really supported at the executive level. And there's, when it was times internally where we were trying to meet our goal and hitting some challenges, having that executive support at every level is what really pushed it across the goal line, because that allows everyone on every team to know, hey, this is like, I'm being supported. This is part of our mandate. Like, let's make it happen.
Yeah, no, and that's great, and it's really positive to hear that's been an easy journey for you. Another sort of point I'm curious about, which is specific to you, Amber. You're dealing with hundreds of suppliers. How easy is it to convince them not to use plastic, or to more just to sort of be more sustainable, whatever the goals are, and what happens if they don't play ball?
Well, I'll think of kind of this in two different ways. So we have our suppliers that, we're producing our products, our own brands from, and we're going to them. And we did have some challenges in our product teams reaching out. We are building our own sustainable packaging hierarchy of, okay, this is how we're going to rank all the many materials that are out there, because as we've all said, there's not a silver bullet, and you have to decide, okay, where are we going to put our efforts behind. And for us, it was around reducing virgin plastic. And really that's been around incorporating PCR and using other materials. So that has ended up being, for our brand Trace Luce, a lot of paperboard in our pallets instead of using any kind of plastic. In our brand Refreshments, it's been incorporating PCR. So it depends on the brand, the product, etc. But sometimes it's been replacing it with aluminum or tin as well. So, I would hear from colleagues in our field, oh, we got up to 65% PCR in this tube. And then we would go to maybe a supplier we had been working with and say, not possible. So it's also been about expanding your network. So our product teams went out and talked to a lot of new suppliers to understand what's out there. And I'll say it's really challenging for small brands because there's a lot of
She's still there.
incredible innovation that's happening at the with larger brands. And
we lost you just for a minute there, I think, Amber, but hopefully you can come back. If not, we can move on and come back to you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, there you are.
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know
worry
what happened.
At all. The joys of remote events. Don't worry at all.
Right. I was just saying, it can be hard for small brands because there's a lot of incredible innovation happening with larger brands, which is fantastic. But sometimes then they completely buy out that supplier, and so it's harder for small brands to get a foothold in the number of COGS or the number of units that you want to order. MOQs can be a challenge. So it involved like really expanding our network, reaching out to new suppliers, going to different locations. So what's happening in Europe, what's happening in Asia, what's happening in the US. Then for our partner brands, like I said, we're just kind of starting out on what it looks like. The way we have typically worked, like if we look at how we've worked with clean beauty, is around setting parameters and definitions of what it means for us and going to our partners to see who meets those qualifications and how we want to badge, and then highlighting them. So this is what we'll probably end up doing for sustainable packaging. Let's like market them and talk about how great they are and inform our members about what kind of choices they can make in our subscriptions. Our kind of lowest level, you can choose one of your products, and our algorithm chooses the rest. For our next bag up, you get to choose 3 of your products. So we see a lot of choice happening, and we really want to empower all of our members to make those choices of what kind of brands and products they're choosing.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important point, actually, Amber. I mean, we should be celebrating those that are making good decisions and that are sort of, taking steps in the right direction. We'll talk a bit about communications later, but there's obviously people are very ready to point the finger at people, rightly so, that are greenwashing, etc. But actually, we should be celebrating those that are doing good things, right, and actually profiling those and things like that. So I think that's really important. If you can use your marketing muscle to help profile them in a positive light, then that's really positive for sure. Great, thank you, Amber. And so Felix, I guess sort of bringing this back together then from where we started. I mean, obviously we've heard it's hugely complex, lots of different things to take into account. If you're a brand that's just starting out with this and you're sort of thinking, right, okay, I want to become more sustainable, we want to do something about our packaging, we want to sort of look at our product life cycle, where do you start? What should companies be doing if they're starting from ground zero here?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the question, like, how do you find a good packaging strategy? And firstly, I always recommend to define, like, what is your ultimate goal? It's already something that Amber and Victoria said is really, what do you want to drive as a company? Is it being plastic free? Is it about recycled content, CO2 emissions? But define that ultimate goal is the first starting point, and then obviously get top level buy-in, which always helps in terms of enforcement and then driving certain decisions. Once you have that, once you have the ultimate goal, it really helps as well because choices may be different. I mean, Victoria said it already in some parts. Depending on where you want to go, actually, it can take certainly different directions. And in case you don't have that, it's really tough to do that. Once you have that goal defined, I would say clearly set as well a baseline on where you stand. Do an assessment on like how much weight do you use, how much different packaging options do exist, and that really look at it in full. Often there's a temptation to just purely look at primary packaging, but it can hold as well to secondary packaging, pallet utilization, tertiary packaging, that are often as well key sources for waste or opportunities at the end to reduce and to do improvements. And that's really something that all aspects need to be considered in that case. And then obviously, Victoria said it as well already, your strategy should be complemented with numbers. It really helps to set clear KPIs, to have definitely a good solid baseline on where you start from. LCAs in that case are often a very, very good tool because it gives you quite often the most comprehensive view and assessment. At times still it can be challenging to obtain all the numbers. I think you need to go very deep and understand everything along the supply chain. So that's challenging, but sometimes it's worth the effort. Or you need to see like where do you as a company want to compromise in terms of precision. And certainly there can be, I would call it shortcuts or options, just purely looking into, simpler calculations when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions, CO2, which at the end don't, support any on-pack claims eventually, or not something that can be communicated externally, but definitely you can make educated decisions whether one material is better than the other, and you can see what impact that you're driving. And then those are certainly the elements that need to be considered and that you need to go to. And typically, once you have done those 3 steps, you're in a quite good shape in formalizing that. And again, top level buy-in is something that definitely helps at the end.
Great, thank you, Felix. One thing we haven't touched on yet, of course, actually, is consumers, and I'm really keen to kind of get your perspectives on what consumers are asking for here. Do you find, I mean, maybe Victoria, will come to you first. What are you finding is most important for consumers when they're thinking about packaging? Like, are you getting this sort of, is that feedback loop in place? And is it price? Is it efficacy? How much is sustainability, basically?
I think still number one, especially with the cost of living crisis, price is what people purchase, followed by efficacy. So the product has to deliver what they expect it to do, have the performance there, and it has to be a price that they are willing to buy into. But I think there is this whole thing coming out about value, and value is not only just price and the performance. There is this element of sustainability, and although it might not be the key drivers at the moment because of the recession that we know that we're heading into, etc., it is something that customers are expecting brands to be doing. And when we come out of the recession, I have no doubt that will become, further up. It will be one of the things that people are buying into brands for. And, brands will lose customers when people are buying more because they haven't done anything and they're not taking those actions. So, we very much believe and do this because we think it's the right thing to do. We're on our B Corp journey. We're in the verification process of that. We've been working with Clean Hub for a number of years now. So although we know our customers, it's something our customers are interested in, it's still not our number 1 or 2 reasons why people purchase into the brand. We do a lot of surveys with them. We're very close to our community, but it will become more and more important, and especially as the younger generations come through and are the ones buying into the products, they absolutely expect it from brands.
Yeah, that's certainly something we do hear from others as well. Really, actually, for brands need to be taking action now to future-proof your business, basically, because it might not be with cost of living, it might not be the immediate thing, but definitely will be increasingly so. Amber, I'm interested in the US market. Is that the same, different? What are consumers over there? What's the perspective?
Yeah, that's super familiar. I think as Victoria was talking, I was like, yes. Quality matters most, like the efficacy, I think. And I think that's where we want to be creating a whole product that's great. And so we want to be creating an excellent formula that's like safe and effective. We want to be packaging that in, sorry, I have a child at the door, you might hear. We want to be packaging that in material that is better for our planet. And we want to be doing it at a price that works for our community. So we care, those, I think, are going to continue to matter in a big way in our current economy. And that's what we see happening as well. So that's, what we're really prioritizing. It's not one more than the other. You really have to do all three, which can be challenging for sure, but it's super important. So it's when we hit all three that we know we're creating something that's really great for the market and that people are going to be really excited about.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think leading on from that, I mean, something we touched on just very briefly, just in terms of the communication, but I guess we've all acknowledged, right, this is not straightforward, and there is a huge amount of scrutiny out there, right? There's a lot of understandably there's a lot of concern by brands about sort of putting your flag in the sand and saying this is what we're doing because of scrutiny, because of accusations of greenwashing and things, which but as I mentioned, obviously, if a brand is greenwashing, we should absolutely be calling out. But there's hesitancy sometimes, a concern around how to communicate about these things, right? Because of that. So how do you go about educating consumers on the topic, talking about your packaging strategy, and sort of taking that out to market? What's the sort of the way, what have you seen work basically in terms of that? Maybe Victoria, we could start with you just to get your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it always has been, it's about transparency and being honest. We tell our customers what we're doing. We say that we don't have all the answers, because we certainly don't. But this is the step that we've taken at this stage, because this is what we know and believe is the right thing to do at this stage. But we might change that because sustainability, although I don't particularly like that word, but it's moving on so quickly, and developments are happening all the time. So yeah, I would say we're just really transparent and honest with our customers, and taking them on the journey and the reasons why we're doing these things.
Yeah, and with that, I mean, I guess, are you finding that there's a level of education that is needed? Because as you say, it's changing all the time. I mean, it's hard to keep up with, even when you're in the industry, right?
I mean, it's so funny you say that. So we're in the office the other day, and we've got a packaging technologist who's so knowledgeable in terms of recycling, etc. And we did a workshop, and we took the two bins are recycling and non-recycling, and we literally opened it up and was like, right, can this be recycled, this not? And even within our office, people are still like, oh, I'm not sure. So absolutely, that is definitely still needed with the consumers. We have little infographics on our website on how to recycle our products, and all of this. But yeah, people are becoming much more knowledgeable, but also that comes with people not quite understanding or getting things wrong or things like that. So we at Naughty have always been about education on our ingredients, about hair care, how to use products, not even our products, just helping people to understand more. And the sustainability part on Naughty, but also Plantopa, is a big part of that for us.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's and it's yeah, exactly as you say. That I think it's so difficult because in different, and we'll talk about the US I think after with this, but it's like even just in different councils in the UK, or different districts, different countries in Europe, or municipalities in the US, different rules apply when it comes to recycling as well, right? So it's very, very difficult to keep on top of that as a consumer, and to know what's the right thing to be doing and things. So I think we really do need that guidance from brands to help as consumers. Amber, I'm interested in your perspective. I mean, are there guiding principles that you live and breathe by when it comes to communicating about your packaging strategy?
Yeah, so I agree with Victoria. It's about transparency, and it's about getting marketing claims right. And I think that's something I think that sometimes we're afraid, not like we, but like collectively can be afraid of putting things out because we don't want to like do any greenwashing. And so it's really finding that balance between let's be fully transparent. Let's not overstate anything. We want to be really, really clear, but we also don't want to understate it. You know, we want to communicate with our consumers. We want to inform them about what to do with this packaging when it's, you know, we're finished with it. We want to get them excited about new materials or better materials that we're using. And so that's been, you know, communicating on package, we've increased the amount of communication we're just doing over our social media to inform our community about what different packages are, what their end of life is, how to use them, how to do more reuse. So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach. I think that for the most part, when it comes to greenwashing, most people, I think, don't want to do it. You know, I think a lot of times it happens by accident because especially, I mean, I'm sure there as well, but in the US, there's very little regulation. There are a lot of terms that don't really mean anything. Or that can imply something that we don't really want to mean. So for us, that's been about putting a lot of checks and balances in place internally to make sure that when we are doing claims on packaging, on social media, wherever we are, that we're going through several layers, that we're checking with legal, that's coming in front of my eyes, because we have incredible people across our company who this isn't their, you know, they're not total experts in this. So we need to make sure a word like green or natural or clean or recyclable, we want to make sure that that's all true. And that's kind of at every level for us, because it's also even, you know, we've had suppliers who have told us that something is recyclable, but it wasn't actually recyclable in the US. It was recyclable in Europe. And unfortunately, in the US, our recycling infrastructure is not as advanced as in Europe and in the EU. And so for another really great check and balance that we've put in place is we're members of How to Recycle. And they have been a really excellent third party for us to vet any of our packaging through. It's really great for R&D. Because as we're creating, you know, looking at packaging options, we can go through How to Recycle and submit a packaging option to see like what level of recyclability are we going to get in the US. And so that has been a huge help for us, and just collecting other resources. You know, I'm more or less a team of one, and we have a packaging team. And so really trying to figure out what are the other ways we can bring in expertise, resources to streamline the process, but also make sure we're not making mistakes. So that's been some of how we really want to inform our communities, but we want to do it right.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really important point there, because yes, obviously there's an education for consumers, but also there's education internally within businesses, because, you know, that's certainly something that brand partners that we work with have spoken to us about the challenges. Sometimes, you know, the person who's putting out the social media about, you know, the sustainability sort of goals or whatever it is may be sort of slightly a couple of steps removed from, you know, the person who's actually setting the KPIs in some places. And actually that's when that unintentional greenwashing can come into place, because there's just one word which is incorrect and then actually it becomes misleading. But the intent, that's definitely not the intention. It's just that actually the communications people, marketing people, you know, everybody needs to be involved in those conversations and have a level of education and understanding about it, particularly if you're the ones that are out there putting the communications out. Felix, I mean, what's your perspective on this in terms of how to avoid the pitfalls? You know, what can go wrong when it's not even on purpose, exactly as we just described?
Yeah, and I think some examples already quite well that Amber and Victoria said. I think all in all, I mean, greenwashing is definitely this kind of super sensitive topic, and you know, consumers are getting more and more aware on what is happening. So like simple claims as this is good for the environment, I think don't work anymore. And I think it rather leads into this consumer deception part where it's rather like false claims almost. And that's almost the challenging part where at least I think what's going to come is well more legislation and more regulations around that space on what is acceptable and what is possible on pack. So that's definitely something that's going to come. And I mean, as Victoria said, I think it's always this point, be super transparent and be honest on, what is happening and what is the intention of the claim that you're putting out. And I think as well to the example from Amber, I mean, even within Europe, countries do recycle things differently and the collection systems are different. Sometimes it's curbside, sometimes it's a store drop-off. And putting a universal pack-on claim which says I'm recyclable and that holds true for all European countries is not possible. So that needs to be really, clearly differentiated and challenged. And then when it comes to packaging, I mean, you always see the little asterisk which say this has been recycled or this has recycled content, but it's actually only the bottle, but not the cap and not the label. So you need to be as well always very specific on what is actually happening, given the multiple components that typically your cosmetic packaging have. So those are definitely the watch outs. And for anything that becomes more tricky, I think always the data part is something that's super essential. If you want to claim your packaging has less material compared to what? So like good databases for comparison is needed. The same for any greenhouse gas emissions. You need to have solid data to back up those claims. That's why you see as well them quite rarely on pack, because it's critical to or difficult to obtain data, but ultimately like an end goal where you want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So really, authenticity, being transparent, backing up claims, all of the kind of key things which are absolutely critical. And also the fact that it is a journey. I think that's the important thing in the communications piece as well. Like we've sort of been saying quite a bit with this, that silver bullet doesn't exist yet. So this is what we're doing today. This is what we're intending to do, and this is how we're intending to get there, and backing that up for sure. We've got a couple of questions in the chat just around this topic, so I might just ask those now, and then we can come back to some of the other questions in the chat at the end. But there's one here from Venetia Taylor, who says, from a consumer perspective, what do they want to see on a pack besides the accreditation logos from recycling and upcycling? And how are brands doing this? Is it as simple as a QR code to show more information about the product brand overall? I don't know, Victoria, Amber, if one of you want to take that one.
Sure. Well, I'll just do another plug for how to recycle. So because they're not only like we're using them a lot for R&D, but they create these labels, and I should have had one on my desk. And I think they're in the US and Canada. And it's the problem is there's been a lot of problems in marketing and co-opting of the little triangles that mean different things for recycling. They're super confusing, that aren't always accurate. So how to recycle has really come in, and they create these super simple labels, just like Felix is talking about. They're like lid trash, like lid trash, bottle, recyclable, this bin. So that is, for me as a consumer, been so helpful. So I feel like in the US, that's becoming the gold standard. We're seeing that for a lot of big brands, so that people can fully understand, like, what do I actually do with different parts of this product? I think that that's probably the leading solution in the United States right now.
Great, thank you, Amber. And another question that's come through is, there's been some criticism of larger brands changing packaging to images of plants and greener colors to give the illusion that they're more environmentally friendly than they perhaps are. Do we think consumers are more switched on these days? And have you noticed a shift in their behavior as well? I don't know who wants to take that. Victoria, Felix, one of you have a perspective?
Yeah, I think consumers are much more switched on. They absolutely can see an authentic brand who actually is doing it because they want to make a difference, and those that are just doing it for a marketing claim. And I think as we get further down this journey, and as the sustainability and people on the planet are becoming more and more important to people, those brands are going to really struggle to get the buy-in that they used to.
Yeah, for sure. And Felix, I mean, I don't know if you've got anything in addition to add to that.
Yeah, I would echo basically what was just said, because brands are, consumers are so much more aware, and those little tricks, I think companies rather fall into a trap if they do that, because I think many years back, it was always easy to use green to show some, sustainability claims. But in the meantime, it's rather this, creates rather confusion than help. And I think for brands, they don't do a good favor themselves if they go into that route.
Yeah, for sure. And we are getting some more questions in, but we'll continue sort of just talking a little bit about sort of some of the bigger topics and come back to the other questions at the end. Well, I guess sort of, it's that time of year. We're all looking forward to 2023. I'm quite curious when it comes to this topic. And Felix, maybe this is one for you. What are you seeing in terms of sort of innovations and trends as we look ahead now that brands should be looking out for, and things that you're quite sort of optimistic about that might help solve some of these challenges that we've discussed today?
Yeah, probably I would call out like 3 different trend spaces. I mean, one I would call Bring Me Back, which is around the reuse and reusability of containers. So creating those reuse schemes when it's coming to e-commerce or primary packaging, that's definitely something that's going to come. And more companies are actually providing options or offering reusable options in different versions. Which targets as well on this like fight against single-use plastics. So that's definitely, I think, something that's going to come and going to be more driving in the years to come. The second trend space, I would call it Recycling Me, which is around topics that we already had, designed for recycling. So really making sure that all components, including the colors of your bottle, the label sizes, are actually really fit for recycling and help in terms of closing the loop and improving recycling quotas. That still needs a strong effort to come. And then third space, I would call it Little to None, where it's actually about reduction and reduce of different materials, which can go into various different directions. I mean, coming from the products, I mean, if you look at some of the shampoos, I mean, there's still a lot of water that is a shampoo. So if you start condensing that and bringing it into different packaging product formats and within different packaging formats, that's I think going to be a key driver moving forward. And this whole theme around having basically no packaging, or like this unwrapped stores that are going to come, which probably go as well into the whole space of cosmetics more and more. So those 3 spaces, definitely something to watch out for the next year. And I would say specifically, because you asked about material innovations, I think we're going to see some or more of bio-based or bio-sourced materials that are still recyclable, but function as this type of drop-in materials that work as conventional materials, but just come out of different origins and different sources. And I'm hesitant to say about these biodegradable materials. I think some are going to come, but still I would say the adoption that I'm going to see for cosmetics, given that then cosmetic or product remnants may end up in the environment, I think is going to be the most challenging part in that space, even though a lot of consumers and are demanding for those type of options in replacing plastics.
Thank you, Felix. Very helpful, for sure. And I guess one of the other things as well, which seems to come up time and time again with this, is okay, we're great. We've got these innovations. We're going to keep an eye on all of these things. That's fantastic. But if we're really going to make a difference here collectively, then actually collaboration is absolutely critical in the cosmetics industry, and of course beyond. But actually, particularly in the cosmetics industry, smaller brands rely on bigger brands with much bigger R&D budgets to be driving forward some of these innovations, so that, and then sharing that knowledge, right? I think that's the critical piece, but that does seem to be something which is often missing. I mean, I don't know it'd be interesting. We're getting all of your perspectives on this, really. I mean, maybe Victoria, will start with you. I know in the UK, the British Beauty Council are doing some good things. Is that making a difference? Sort of what do you think needs to happen?
Yeah, I think there's been a real shift in the last year or so in terms of that. I believe, a couple of years ago, it was so hush-hush confidential. There wasn't that sharing at all between any of the big players, let alone to some of the smaller brands. But I do believe that is very much starting to change, especially within the UK. There's a lot of different organizations now that are partnering with each other and creating these sets of goals between us. So the British Beauty Council have got the Sustainability Council on there, and that's got lots of different companies coming together to drive that change, especially within the government, because we know that there isn't a lot going on there. So yeah, I think it's slow. It's always going to be slow. The big players, they have the R&D budgets to make real big change, but it is, again, coming back to the UN sustainability goals, we've got to all work together in order to make a long-term difference and a difference quite quickly. We did have the Beauty Council did have a thing the other week where everybody was coming together and nobody knew who was there. It was, confidential, and we didn't share which companies we came from, so that we could have an open and honest conversation and just come up with ideas about how we can make a difference. And I think that is starting to happen and will continue, which is great.
Yeah, for sure. And as you say, urgently needed, really. Felix, I'm really interested in your perspective here. You've worked for some of the big giants in your career. Do you think that there's a willingness there? What's the perspective from a much bigger company to sort of to knowledge share and to bring people in on the journey?
Yeah, I think definitely this silo approach is starting to stop, and it's really becoming more a cross-industry collaboration at the end. One of the projects, maybe to mention, which goes into recycling and sorting of waste that's happening here across Europe is the Holy Grail initiative, which happens around again, sorting of materials. And I would say that was one of the first projects where the whole value chain actually started to come together, from resin producers up to waste management, sorters at the end, to tackle the question around how do we get better recycling quotas, improve our recycling streams. And I'm quite optimistic that we're going to see more and more of those cross-industry collaborations to tackle the big problem. I think in silos, it's going to be impossible to do it at the end.
Yeah, for sure. And Amber, what are you seeing in the US? I mean, is that collaboration there? What else needs to happen?
Yeah. So I think there are some areas of collaborations that are happening, and I think the culture of I think people like us who are doing this job is all about sharing. So I think, if I'm talking to somebody in a role like mine at another beauty company, like we're like sharing ideas, talking about what we can do, I think that is definitely there. And many of us get the idea that this is a collective problem that we have to solve together. I think when it comes down to like these sort of bigger initiatives or like sourcing really innovative products, that's where it's really challenging to access the same kind of innovations that a big conglomerate can access. So that's where I'd love to see, if anyone wants to partner, like let us know. Like we'd love to work with one of those. And I think it could be really interesting to see like how are those solutions happening at massive scale versus like a newer brand, because we have to be providing meeting those solutions across the industry. One organization that we are a member of is the Pact Collective, and that's based in the US. And that's really a group that's about trying to solve the problem of the many beauty cosmetic products that are so hard to recycle within the US infrastructure. So that has been a great place for collaboration and getting to know a lot of people, and an organization that's really working to solve this very specific problem for products in the US within our infrastructure. So that's been a great group for collaboration, but I'm excited to see what more can come in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to any of the bigger brands out there that might listen to this. Then we've got plenty of people that want to collaborate. Great. Well, look, we've got a few more questions that have come through. So why don't we work through some of those, because we've got about 5 minutes left. And for anyone listening, if you do have a question, do put it in the chat. Felix, we have one for you from Paolo. Do you see considerable differences between, I guess, food and beverage and the cosmetics industry in developing and introducing sustainable packaging? Oh, I think you're on mute.
Still, food and beverage is the most challenging one, I would say, because of the different standards that apply, and when it comes to shelf life, food protection, food waste, that's typically the highest standard that needs to be addressed. Given different regulations and product needs, I think there's still a bit more leeway when it comes to PCR use in cosmetics compared to food, because again, in food contact materials are quite scarce when it comes to recycled content. That's super challenging. And as well, I think you're going to see a bit of differences as well, depending on where you are. Whether in the US, there's typically more recycled content or recycled materials already available, given the FDA approach compared to what we have in Europe. But yeah, I would say cosmetics, there's slight, advantages in that case.
Thank you, Felix. And one for you, Victoria, from Katie. So in terms of LCA of sugarcane versus PCR in tubes, what was the outcome of the analysis? Was sugarcane exponentially better than using PCR?
So it depends on the amount of PCR content within the tube. So we have worked out that you need to have at least 72% PCR content within the tube, and that's including the cap as well. So when we're talking about it, I'm talking about the whole thing to make it better. But that's also dependent on a few things as well, on where you get your sugarcane from, where you get your PCR from, etc. So, a full life cycle analysis really does have to be taken. But as a general rule, 100% PCR from a carbon footprint emissions perspective is better, but it's whether you can get that in a tube. And if you know somewhere that can, do let me know.
Lovely, thank you.
We've got one here, I should say, because you can get 100% PCR tubes, but it's the filling that can be challenging.
Great. All right. Thank you for that clarification, Victoria. We have one here from Joanne, and actually it's we're talking about the UK here, but I think actually this is probably broader anyway. So refill shops across the UK have been struggling over the past few years and facing closure. Is there scope for brands to offer refillable solutions with online orders? I don't know who wants to take that one. We have a perspective.
I've seen this happen, and Felix, you may know more, so feel free to chime in. But I think, and when we look at our R&D, what this has looked like, considering for us is shipping a more substantial container first, and then the refill would be something that's very small, or like you would see for a hand soap. You would get like a very more substantial, like hard container that may be plastic, and then or like glass or something different. And then the refill is like a flexible container that is much less waste. So that's why I think online refill works, and how like some companies are doing it, how we're looking at doing it. But what would not be cost effective is like shipping back the item, refilling it more like a refill station, and then shipping that back. From like a carbon perspective, cost, etc. That's where it would get quite challenging.
Yeah, thank you, Amber. And last question in here to sort of summarize this one. Really, the question is, how can how can we make it easier for smaller brands to be more, that are eco-friendly, sustainable, smaller brands to be more readily available in supermarkets or high street stores, so that actually shoppers have more options? Felix, maybe one for you on this one.
Yeah, I think that's still a quite challenging one on smaller brands, because still, as we said before, like in terms of R&D, capabilities and capacity, typically large brands are just leading it, and often they become as well with that the first line of actually having access to the materials. So it's quite challenging across the board for different materials until it really triggers down to smaller brands and it really becomes readily available. I think it's unfortunately a bit patience, I would say, that needs to come until materials are going to be scaled up and more broadly available. Because most of the things, due to R&D capacity, it just remains a lot with large players.
I would like to add, though, also, it's down to the consumer as well, because obviously if they say to the retailers, look, we're wanting a different choice, we're not wanting the bigger players, because the bigger players have got the money to pay for the space and the marketing in store, etc. Which ultimately what it comes down to when you go into a supermarket, etc., you have to have those funds to be able to do that. And the smaller brands, even if they are making those choices and they are more environmentally friendly, etc., they don't have the funds to actually get into store. So I think it's down to the consumer as well, making sure that they say to their supermarkets, look, we're wanting a point of difference, so we're wanting something different.
Yeah, very good point. And Amber, I don't know if you have a perspective on this one.
So this is something that as IPSI, our subscription that we're really excited about doing is that we give access to a bigger marketplace to smaller brands. So for consumers to gain awareness about what they're about, to try them for the first time. So this is what we've been really excited to work with a lot of different brands this way, to bring smaller brands into the marketplace and to educate and get our consumers really excited about it. Like, we want them to have those brands in their hands, to learn about different packaging, to sort of get excited about it. And we see when consumers test those brands within our subscriptions, they end up becoming committed users and buying them in the future.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Amber. Also very good points. So we are actually 1 minute over. So I think I just want to sort of finish up really just to say thank you all very, very much for a really insightful conversation. I feel like this is something that we could talk about for hours, but some really good nuggets and tips for people there. Any final tips to share with brands or anybody that's starting out on this? Amber, do you want to just give your perspective?
Sure. I think, for anyone who's sort of starting out on this journey, there's a lot out there, but take it, one thing at a time. Start with what you can control. Talk to other people in our field. Everyone in our field, I think, is really excited to share learnings and to build this together. There's a lot of passionate people who really want to help you make a difference. So just reach out and get to know people and get started.
Thanks, Amber. Victoria?
Yeah, I would say the same as Amber, really. Start with what you can control. Every little step helps. Every change can and make a difference. So, it doesn't have to be everything. You don't have to do everything. You can start small and grow from there. And
Felix?
I would say the same. I mean, let's start moving into the sustainability direction and sustainable direction. I think, small steps, any step helps, and that it's for us to get started and do more.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again. Thanks everyone for joining. We'll be sending the recording round as well. So see you next time. Thank you.